Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sara Brumfield with From the Page. I'm here today with Ben, my partner. I wanted to tell you about what we've learned from over a decade of running crowdsourcing projects.
Before we do this, we want to mention that we have a couple of another webinar coming up
Next week. It's a really interesting one because we've been experimenting with AI-generated transcripts and what that means for a human-centered software system like ours. So we'd love to have you there if you're interested. We'll probably at the end, we'll drop in the link to that so you can find it. We will send out a resource list after this webinar with links to the things that we mentioned. What we're going to go through today is what's From the Page, our crowdsourcing platform. We think that a lot of the material that we cover is applicable to From the Page projects, but also to other types of crowdsourcing projects. What's effective crowdsourcing, how to think about it, like how to be successful, right? This is something that a lot of people have never run this type of project before. And so we have thoughts. A lot of those thoughts are thinking about your volunteers. Who is doing work with your material and why, and how can you make that meaningful work for them? Selecting the material that you're going to use, developing your project instructions, kicking off your project. I think a good kickoff is a good place to start, and then how to keep volunteers engaged. After that, we will open for discussion, Q&A, and we'll do a short walkthrough of From the Page. So if you're interested in kind of how we approach these different pieces, you'll get a chance to see that as well. Excellent.
Okay. So I'm going to ask Sara to man the waiting room.
Yeah, but we'll see.
All right. So Sara and I run a platform for crowdsourcing manuscript transcription, OCR correction, and other kind of archival-based documentary crowdsourcing projects called From the Page. There are a lot of different kinds of crowdsourcing tasks out there. Again, we focus on things that primarily revolve around historic documents, but a lot of the things we're talking about in this webinar are kind of the soft skills that we have learned that are applicable to running almost any project, in our opinion. So in brief, our platform allows people to see an image of a page and to transcribe the text from the page. So we try to keep things as simple as possible for users because, honestly, transcribing text is hard enough. So we've seen a lot of successful projects over the last few years. Here are a handful of the institutions that we've worked with and hosted on From the Page. So what I want to talk about is effective crowdsourcing. So in my opinion, effective crowdsourcing is a collaboration between a memory institution and the public. The goal of that, and usually there are two goals, right, are deep public engagement with special collections and archives. So when I say deep engagement, I'd like to define that. So most organizations have a social media presence, Instagram accounts, things like that. That allows them to expose their material more broadly to the public. So that's wonderful, right? We get this breadth of reach. One of the challenges, though, is that it's a broad engagement, but it's kind of a shallow engagement. The only way that people can engage with the material is maybe a like button or a share button. Maybe they can leave a comment on a social media platform like Facebook or YouTube or something, but it's not really an immersive engagement, and it doesn't bring the public's knowledge and expertise and passion back into the institution that shared the content. So in addition to being about engagement, crowdsourcing is about improving metadata for digitized assets in ways that require massive amounts of human interpretation. So that doesn't necessarily mean massive numbers of humans or massive numbers of items. It could just be one person who's really passionate, who's willing to spend a lot of time transcribing a single set of letters or a single diary, right? That doesn't seem that big, but that's the kind of task that archive staff usually aren't able to do, right? They are not able to commit their resources to a full text transcript of every page of something when there are boxes and boxes of unprocessed collections that no one can find because there's no finding aid. This also isn't something that institutions typically have the resources to prioritize. but it is something that passionate volunteers can do.
So we like this example on the screen. It's a project by the Chicago Botanic Library, and it's an orchidologist notebook. And there's actually not a lot of text on each page. There's beautiful pictures, hand-drawn pictures of orchids, and there's a lot of really technical knowledge. There's Latin names of the orchids. The journal is actually in German, so there's definitely a lot of kind of specialty knowledge that a transcriber had to bring to the table in order to make this more accessible.
Right, and again, that's not the kind of thing that the archive staff, or in this case the library staff, can do, right? That's not kind of within their remit. So effective crowdsourcing is only possible with the guidance and engagement of library and archive staff, right? You can't replace staff members and trained information professionals with the crowd, right? That just doesn't work. Crowdsourcing is not free labor.
We have a cute picture of a puppy here because we have a standing joke that crowdsourcing is not free as in speech or free as in beer, it's free as in puppy. The puppy is free, but you have to take care of it. You have to do work. The volunteers that are participating in these projects don't like being ignored. They don't like having their work lost. They are doing something that is meaningful and they're engaging with you and your institution. Therefore, you kind of have to make sure that their work is meaningful and that you engage with them.
Right, so we're not replacing staff with the crowd and we're not getting free labor, but we think that crowdsourcing is an amazingly valuable way for institutions and the public to create things together.
So we're going to talk about the work that goes into successful crowdsourcing projects. So let's start with the volunteers, because if you don't have volunteers, you're not going to have a successful crowdsourcing project, right? I used to have just one slide on this, but now I have like 4 because volunteers are so important to crowdsourcing projects. So this is a snapshot of a week on From the Page. This is right after we hit our 2 millionth page transcribed. What were we?
We're really close to 3 million. Like
Yeah.
we might hit that this week.
Yes, super exciting. And over that particular week, we had 450 volunteers working on the platform. When we look across a year, we have 5,000. Sometimes I think that number has actually gone up over the last year to 6,500. And that's pretty neat. And we want that magic to happen for you to post your material in From the Page, for one of these volunteers to find it and to start working on it. Where we give volunteers a lot of ways to find interesting, active, well-managed projects, but making that match is sometimes hard. We send out a monthly newsletter that features new projects, and we feature new projects on our Find a Project screen. You can also kind of sort and look at different projects by different types. So we do a lot of things where we're trying to match volunteers and their interests to the projects that institutions are running. But we also suggests that you work to recruit volunteers locally or within the context of your institution, because we know, and there's actually research that backs this up, which is kind of fascinating, your most dedicated volunteers are the ones that already have a tie to your institution, to your location, to your material. So there's lots of different ways to find volunteers. This is actually a picture from some of the Library of Virginia's volunteers at their annual, get this, Transcribiversary. So I love how diverse this group is. We have a lot of our volunteers on From the Page skew older, but here you see that they have a lot of younger volunteers. But a lot of, what we have found is a lot of retirees love working on projects like this, but students are also attracted to it for, online volunteering and learning skills like paleography. So what you should ask yourself, how you should start, is by thinking, where can we find volunteers? Are we satisfied with whoever happens to be coming in from the page, or do we want more volunteers? Do we want people who already have a relationship with our institution who might like to have an opportunity to work online from home volunteering for us? Thinking about who those people are and how to reach out maybe to your local genealogy societies or your local history societies and find those people who'd be interested in working with you. So maybe your material is deep on a particular subject matter and you can reach out to communities around that subject matter. So maybe not local. One of our early projects was with the Yaquina Head lighthouses. They had lighthouse keepers logs for decades, and they were able to engage with lighthouse aficionados. It turns out there are people who are really enthusiastic about lighthouses, and having those people virtually come in and work on transcribing was fun to them, right? So when you think about your volunteers, you can also think about the material that has been most popular with your patrons and why it's popular. This image is a volunteer with the Missouri State Archives holding her grandfather's death certificate. Genealogists love projects with lots of names and vital information, even if the material is not as engaging as, a diary or letters. So we've seen some very successful projects with heritage organizations like the Daughters of the American Revolution. Many of those heritage organizations put in a lot of work to get service hours for their members, and these types of projects are great matches for that. The last thing to realize when you think about volunteers is that crowdsourcing is something you're probably not that familiar with, and it may not be something your volunteers are familiar with either. It's a bit intimidating, right? So if you think through how you can make it easier for them, that puts you in a good mindset for working with your volunteers. And what we see is volunteers and transcribers get really into this type of work. It's fun and it's engaging. So the image on the screen represents the most active transcribers, people who did more than 10 pages on 3 totally different projects, one at the Indiana Archives, one at the Library of Virginia, and one at the California State Libraries, all state ones because of the type of material this was. And what you see is that while the bulk of their most active transcribers were independent, right, they were kind of only working on their projects, there were overlaps. There are volunteers who go from project to project. This particular one was a
They were all World War I based.
Yeah.
Right. Questionnaires, service cards, and letters, I believe.
Right. And so, you get your World War I fans who are looking for that type of material and are willing to work for anyone who has that kind of material that lines up with their passions. But we also have people like one volunteer who about once a month will scroll through the list of new projects looking for something she hasn't worked on, and she'll hop on and try something new. It's kind of fascinating because sometimes she finds something she's really interested in and she goes deep and contributes a lot, hours a day. And sometimes she does a page or two and then she moves on.
But she's touched almost every single project on our platform. So how do you figure out what kind of material is appropriate for a crowdsourcing project? Volunteers are motivated by a number of things. Not every volunteer is motivated by the same thing. So we recommend that you choose material that can tell a good story, provide an immersive experience, or that contains local history or genealogy or information. So one thing to look for is material that can tell good stories. So if you get started reading a diary, you want to turn the page and find out what happens next. That's also true, and perhaps more true, if you're transcribing a diary. So letters and diaries provide intrinsic motivation through the narrative, right? There's this narrative momentum. You want to know what's going to happen next. And volunteers will build a connection with people in the story. Like in this email that I got from a diary transcription project that I run, you can see at the bottom an example page from this diary, and at the top you get this email from someone who lives in a totally different continent saying, what's going on with this person who shows up in the diary who is sick? What's the matter with Josie? The diarist is worried about her health and glad that people are coming to visit. What's going on, right? Now, it turns out that in this case, I know Josie is dying of stomach cancer and only has about 3 more weeks to live. But, the volunteer wanted to know that, right? There is that connection through that deep engagement, that deep reading during the transcription process. So letters and diaries provide an immersive experience to people transcribing them through narrative, but non-narrative material can do the same thing. So when the Alabama State Archives indexed World War I service cards, their collections were organized by county. So as a result, volunteers who were paired with the county that they lived in or that they were from, those volunteers got a snapshot of that community in 1918 as they indexed each service member's name, how old they were, where they enlisted, what branch they were in, right? So even though this isn't a narrative, wow, I recognize these people, I recognize these places, it's really, really nice. You can also be successful with material that has a lot of local history. Indianapolis Public Library ran a project transcribing records from Indianapolis public schools. Now, in my opinion, these records are really dry, right? They're even drier than the World War I service cards because they're just lists of names of students and parents. But they're a genealogist's gold mine, and volunteers understood that. A lot of genealogists want to give back because online records have gotten them over brick walls, and they understand the value and the importance of making these things available.
So we also find that if you can give your volunteers a sense of accomplishment, that's very motivating. I think many of us are motivated by checking things off the list. So some of those World War I service card projects were very successful. And I think part of it was you had a single card. This Alabama Department of Archives and History, they were the first to do one of these World War I service card projects. And they only collected about 5 fields from each card, so a transcriber could get a lot done. When we get things done, we get that feeling of accomplishment, and that keeps you coming back. This particular Alabama project was 111,000 World War I service cards, and they transcribed them all in 2.5 months. We think it's because their material hit so many of these points, right? They had great relationships with their local genealogy and history organizations. It was immersive. You could do it quickly and feel very accomplished. But it blew all of us, including Alabama, away.
It also helped that the cards were typewritten.
Oh, yeah. They're probably typewritten. Yeah, it's very not hard to do.
Yeah. Okay, so once you've identified the material, the next thing to do is to define the task. So for transcription projects, that means giving people instructions on how to transcribe. The minute that anyone encounters a word that's unclear to read, or they hit an abbreviation or a spelling that's non-standard, they're going to have questions. So we encourage project owners to develop transcription conventions that give instructions to volunteers as to what to do when they hit these things. So we actually show the transcription conventions on the transcription screen itself. So it's right underneath the form that volunteers are typing into, so they can see it if they run into problems. And this is an example from the Wisconsin Historical Society that always has amazing documentation, right? I mean, this is great. Tips and tricks down at the bottom even. One of the things that we recommend is that you transcribe a few example pages and upload those as a separate section, and you can link to them because people will go try to figure out, well, how did they do this, right? Especially if they run into things that aren't covered by your transcription conventions. So as you work through projects, you can iterate, you can improve your conventions with your help text as people ask questions, or you learn more, or you discover they're doing things you don't like. You can add pieces of that as you go along. We think that as you're creating your examples, if you can do that with a handful of staff members, like go out into the hall and grab someone and ask them to transcribe a page. Listen to the questions that they ask you. That gives you a great opportunity to update your transcription conventions and your examples based on their experience as your very first person who's new to the project. So getting people together to transcribe in person is a great way to develop your instructions, but they're also great ways to get a project started and launched, because you can do outreach with them, doing transcribe-a-thons. So Library of Virginia does a transcribe-a-thon every month. Actually, they do 2 a month, one remote, one in person, yes. You don't have to do that, but you can launch a transcribe-a-thon at the very beginning of a project and bring in people who you think might be leaders within the field or within their communities. You get people who are active in genealogy organizations or enthusiast communities or local historical societies to do an in-person transcribe-a-thon. What this does, it lets you give some hands-on instructions to get people over the hump and discomfort of, what am I doing here? Is my work good enough? And also, familiarize them with the material, with the technology, with your expectations. then they can take that confidence and that knowledge and that enthusiasm back to their communities and enlist other people and encourage other people to join in. Transcribathons can be a great event that local media likes to highlight, so they're great for outreach. Good example here, the French department at Tulane is promoting a transcribathon that they don't even run. This is being run by the New Orleans Jazz Museum, in which the Jazz Museum is having people transcribe documents written in colonial French. So it makes perfect sense that somebody in New Orleans who's interested in French would be interested in this project, but Tulane is promoting a project by the Jazz Museum. Kind of cool. Participants even can promote these themselves. You look on the right-hand side, and here's a post by someone who is so excited that they are at a transcribathon getting to work on Anglo-Saxon manuscripts that they're doing a photo of the whole thing. Just incredible. So it's possible to do transcribathons remotely. The communication barrier is higher, but you can do a video conference kickoff to walk volunteers through the project, especially if you have motivated, tech-savvy volunteers. So this is an example of a transcribathon for medievalists that was held in conjunction with a virtual conference put on by the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies. So you don't have to run a transcribathon when you kick off a project. It's just one way to reach people.
But no matter what you do, you should do some sort of kickoff, right? And you should do some outreach and marketing. If you have existing outreach venues, so maybe your institution has mailing lists, if you have social media accounts, you should definitely use those to mention and push your project. Electronic mailing lists seem to be one of the best ways to do this. So people don't necessarily read social media, but they do often read the newsletters that your institution sends more. Maybe it's profiling for our retiree profile of volunteers, I'm not sure. But if you have a physical location, you can also do things like handouts. If you have a checkout desk or as you walk out the door, you can post handouts people can grab. You can also look for subject matter enthusiast communities, people who'd be interested in the material and might not be local, but who may be in on Facebook or on X. You can find, lighthouse groups and post to those groups. Sometimes there's magazines that you can reach out to. We actually have a whole post that we'll provide in our follow-up email about how to find organizations who might be interested in a particular subject. We've also seen local news channels, both print and television, pick up these projects because they're interesting, they're visual, you have cool old documents, they have people that you can come in and take pictures of, and they're feel-good stories, right? They're a way for the local community to contribute to your mission of preserving memory. So this is coverage by a local TV station of the project from the Seattle Municipal Archives, and I think it's great. You've got the city records in the background, you've got the archivist in the front, and it's just great. But when the North Carolina State Archives launched their Colonial Court Records project, they had coverage in 2 large newspapers. So it happened around the holidays, so slow news days, and it brought in a lot of interested volunteers. Those days were actually the highest number of visits from the Page's website that entire year. In the sense that we were getting alerts all day over Thanksgiving weekend, I think, or Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah. Once you kick off your project, you're going to want to start, and you're starting to get volunteers working on it. You want to figure out how to keep them engaged. So it's not unusual for volunteers to drop by to transcribe a page, and you may never see them again. We have a couple of suggestions for keeping those volunteers. The more you can keep, the more you'll accomplish. So the first thing is to welcome new users. We send out a note every night to each project owner telling them what's gone on in their collections the previous day. You'll get something like the screenshot at the bottom where it shows you the name of someone who joined your particular project. You can also go to your collaborator tab and see people who joined. You can grab their email addresses if they've opted in, and you can send them a welcome email. A stock one is fine, but tell them what the project is, the purpose. Volunteers really like purpose. And what is the transcribed material going to be used for? If you have any training materials, or you can reiterate your transcription conventions, you can link to your help tab, and include how to contact you. You want them to be able to ask questions or share something they've found, or see if they can bring a group of 20 people to help you transcribe, all of those things. And you want them to be able to find you, so make it easy. In addition to welcoming new users, that nightly email will also include comments and questions from your collaborators, from the volunteers who are transcribing for you.
So volunteers can ask questions as they work, and answers by, at least on our platform, answers by staff or other volunteers will appear in the place, on the same place that they're
on the page.
On the page, right? So the example on the right is just an example of comments in that nightly email. That's one email that I got one night. And you can see, there's actually not many questions. There's just a lot of descriptions of stuff that this person has found, saying, oh, well, they mentioned this one term and here's what that is, right? Or they mentioned this person and here's who they are. That's really great stuff. You don't want it in the transcription of the text.
Which is part of why we have a notes section that people can put it there.
You want people to be able to share that knowledge and that experience, right? But this is also a great place for a Q&A. So if you look at the bottom left, you'll see an example of a page on one of the Lighthouse projects we were talking about. There's a volunteer named Olivia who is transcribing these Lighthouse Keepers logs. And, we just have like 1 or 2 sentences per day. And she posts saying there's a lot of activity around a hack. They cleaned it on the 12th, they painted on the 21st and 22nd, and then they are varnishing it on the 25th. What is a hack? Okay, so the people running the project respond the next day, immediately, right? Saying, we have no idea. We tried looking it up, we don't have a clue, but nice find, we'll keep trying. And that's really important, right? Because even though they don't have an answer, the volunteer knows someone is paying attention, knows that their work is important, right? There's nothing makes you feel more ignored than asking a question of someone you're trying to help out and getting no response. And come to find out the very next day, the friends group says, hey, we looked this up and a hack boat is a general purpose boat, something that would be totally useful if you were a lighthouse keeper.
Okay, so in addition to responding to those questions and comments, we recommend that you include your contact information on the footer of every page. We give you a place to configure that. This one's from LA County Library, and they link to their Facebook, where they are on Twitter and Instagram, and that questions contact us is a mail to form. So they kind of go above and beyond, add in their graphics, things like that. But even just a sentence that has how to get in contact with you is good, because people don't always want to ask questions in public.
Or oftentimes we see people who have related material that they would like to contribute to the archives and make that inquiry, or they have research questions and make that inquiry. That's not really a crowdsourcing activity, but the crowdsourcing activity is what brought them in and got them engaged.
Right. So the last thing we recommend is that you send a newsletter. It doesn't have to be complicated or big. Doing something as often as you can, ideally maybe once a month, but if you only get to it once a quarter, that's okay too. Sometimes people use newsletters to kind of rejuice a project that's gone a little bit stale. You can pull in a list of all your collaborator emails from the project owner view and from the page, and you can paste them into your email client, or if you use something like MailChimp or Constant Contact, you can put them there. But you can also, just put them in a BCC field for an email that you send out. And we have a blog post that we'll send out that has a lot of examples of what different people do for crowdsourcing project newsletters. There's lots of ways to kind of celebrate your volunteers or the milestones they've met, and to have a rah-rah, isn't this cool material, stories that you found in the material. All of that makes people feel like they're part of something vital. And that, I think, we're all looking for. This is my inspiring reason slide. So we're engineers, we're not always good at raw motivation, but I think understanding that we individually benefit from the work done by our volunteers, but that the entire historical community benefits from that increased public awareness and appreciation, and that's what crowdsourcing can do. It can invite citizens to join in that work and give them a sense of responsibility for the past that we all share. So we'd encourage you to just get started. We do quick start calls. You can do a 200-page trial to play with from the page. And, we just want people to see the magic of crowdsourcing and to start imagining how to make it work for your archives. So that link that I have there will also be in the follow-up email, and that's kind of the end of our formal presentation.
Yeah, so we're going to switch over to just questions and answers or discussion. So we'd encourage you to type questions in the chat. Actually, our group is small enough that if anybody wants to unmute themselves, feel free.
And then,
Yeah, and then if there's time, we'll do a demo.
yeah, which I think will be time unless we have lots and lots of discussion.
Sometimes we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, any questions or comments or concerns?
We have been doing this we've been running projects for about 9 years, working on this software, and actually I guess longer than that when we,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've been doing this for a couple decades.
Yeah. And Krista says she'd love to see a demo. We will definitely get to that. Please stick around. We just don't want to shove it down your throat. You want to go ahead? So we're going to go ahead and share our screen and do some of that demo, but please feel free to interrupt either in the chat or out loud if you have questions as we go along.
Yeah, we interrupted you, and let me just drop in our webinar link as well while we're doing this. So let me get a good example up. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so this is a project that University of North Carolina Chapel Hill runs, transcribing the papers of the Cameron family, who are a local group, and so we are going to transcribe a page, and we're going to do the whole
picked the
thing
shortest page
this
possible.
time. That's right.
Can you actually read that? I don't know what it says. Mr., I guess. Oh, Richard. Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to save that. Oh, and I missed that out. Okay, by Mr. Watson, Stagville. Do we actually think that's Watson? Yeah, I think that's by Mr. Watson. And Stagville is definitely right. And match.
Oh, I don't think it's match. I'm gonna go with March. Although I'm not sure that's an M. And oh gosh, who knows?
Okay.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that one? No, nobody
Okay,
knows.
lots of okay.
It's definitely not Mitch, which is where you landed. Okay, merchant. Ooh, very nice, JS. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, and
I always had an opinion. Maybe it was North. I like merchant myself, but you know.
North could also work, but
Context.
let's
right?
look at the M for Mr. Richard. Okay, and they don't have any specific conventions for doing superscripts, so we're just going to leave them as they are. I'm going to mark that page as done, as it's not. We don't have any additional work to do on it. There's no additional text to transcribe, I guess.
You'll see at the bottom where we talked about transcription conventions. Can you scroll down? I don't know.
I'm sorry, that just plopped us since I was done with that plopped us to the next page much longer.
Okay, we got transcription conventions at the bottom. Those can be customized per project. That notes and questions field towards the bottom is where people can leave notes and questions. We'll have some examples in a minute. Do you want to do?
Yeah, and they actually did say, okay, yeah. So we want everything to be visible to everyone, right? For public projects, we want that to be the case. For private projects, everyone who can see the project should be able to see and monitor and correct everyone else's activity and get credit for it as well.
So this is what kind of Wikipedia calls collaborative knowledge creation. We're very influenced by that philosophy.
So you can see the history of this page. So this was uploaded April 1st of 2020. And then today I transcribed this, and you can see the status of the transcription is incomplete. And then the second edit, you can see where we changed match to merchant, right? Merched, and then got rid of the additional B. So everybody can do this pretty much, see everyone else's work.
There's actually a question in the chat. What does managing volunteer questions and feedback look like time commitment wise? So there's an initial investment of time to get the project set up well, to work on those transcription conventions, figure out what you need that's maybe different from our defaults, to do some volunteer outreach, to try to get people drawn to your project. Once that work has been done, then it's really about 5 minutes a day. It's get the email that we send out, look at it in the morning, respond to questions, which hopefully there's only one or two, which is often the case. And sometimes it's just people chatting, right, about what's on the page. And then kind of just watching what happens. Sometimes, we talked about newsletters. So I love if you can set aside, 2 to 4 hours once a month to send out a transcriber newsletter saying, here's what's going on with our project. Don't forget about us, come back. Right? That's sort of the message. That keeps your project going. Not every project does that or has the time to do that. A lot of it is how fast you want to get through and how much effort you put in there.
So in terms of the mechanics, I wanted to show an example from the Ohio University Libraries working on a journal. And you can see on this particular page, somebody says, hey, the shorthand in line 33, should it be written shortened or is it okay as is? And then somebody else responds. I think, is that
that's actually, that's a staff member.
That's a staff member saying, I think spelling out the word Philadelphia as you have is best. If the shorthand has symbols, I would transcribe the first word or phrase. So hopefully that matches what they've got in their transcription conventions. But if we take a look at the overall flow of transcription, so you can always see all the edits that have happened in this project. You can see a couple of people have been busy in the last couple of days. So we've got a couple of pretty passionate volunteers. But if we look at all of the notes that have been left, it looks like we have a little bit of back and forth, and then things were quiet for months, right? And that's not true of all projects. The British Library has probably hundreds of notes a day because they have this incredibly active community of volunteers who all chat with each other.
So it's not the British Library, that is the UK National Archives.
National Archives, right.
Yeah,
UK National Archives, right.
Yeah.
And they will do things like say, hey, I'm not sure about this particular address. Can anyone look it up in the census records to see what's going on there? And they go off and do all this crazy work. It's amazing.
They're really, really engaged, which is fun.
But the volunteer coordinator is just checking in once a day and making sure nothing is on fire because the volunteers actually monitor each other. Right.
For better or worse.
Yes, yeah.
Mostly for better, but
yes,
occasionally for
so
worse.
sometimes they get snippy.
Yeah.
So what else should we show off?
So in addition to full kind of textual-based transcription, we do field-based, like we showed with those World War I service cards. And we also do spreadsheet-based. In addition to those two types, which hopefully Ben's going to pull up some of those examples, we can also do metadata description for items, which is kind of useful for, let's say you've got a 2-page or 3-page letter or telegram, transcribe it, and then have a metadata form that says, who is this to, from, date, location,
right.
That type of metadata, because the person who just transcribed it is probably the best at capturing that, right?
So let's jump into a text roll project at Florida Memory.
Yes.
Yeah, and this, if anybody's really keen on Florida history, this is a project that could use some help because it is.
Tax rolls they're about the most boring stuff you can do, but it has a lot of names and it's really important.
Right. So if we jump into an individual page and go to transcribe it, you can see that the transcription screen looks very different from the ones that we were looking at before. We don't have a place to type full text, right? What we have is a spreadsheet with columns that largely match the column headers in the example here, right? So they've got column 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then they've got people entering information for each one of these rows.
There's each kind of person who's being taxed.
So when this is being exported, this will come out as a spreadsheet itself. There are plain text exports where we can add this info for spreadsheets for full text search, but really probably this is most useful as a data set.
Right, it's a spreadsheet, and like looking at it as a spreadsheet is kind of cool.
So a different example, if we take a look at this at the UK National Archives, let me go back to a different page that hasn't been. Okay.
Change your layout.
Yeah, let's change the layout to over under because this is kind of crazy. So this is a fascinating project in which we've got, we're creating an index into this text in which we have people kind of summarizing the information, where the location of the name is in the text, the name of the person who's accused. Oh, there's a bug. Ah.
Maybe go back to undo full screen.
Undo full screen?
Yeah, undo it.
Yeah, no, okay, we need to look into that, yes. Now let me go back to a previous.
There we go.
There we go, okay. I don't know what was up with that. Right, but you can see that they're creating a data set of the place on the page, but also the data itself, right? On this date, you have this police office reporting that someone stole a bright bay mare from a stable, and they don't actually know who they are. If you go a little bit further, you see James Buckmaster was reported charged for stealing 3 pounds from his employer, and it was in Henrietta Street, Covent Garden.
So we have another question on, are we using Google Spreadsheets or something else? So you can't embed Google Spreadsheets in software like ours, like if possible to do it on your own or for something, but you can't like put it on the same page as the image. So we actually use a software library that helps us kind of set up and make something that works like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, so the spreadsheet itself is embedded within the transcription screen because we want that directly connected. So afterwards, we're able to export a spreadsheet of the entire document or the entire collection, which has all of this data, but we can add to that. Here's the page this was transcribed from. Here's the work this was transcribed from. Here's a link to the page if you need to edit it. Also other metadata like here's who did the transcriptions, here's how many people edited this page, things like that we think are pretty important.
Right. Maybe we should show how to get material in and out.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let me switch to a project that I run. So this is a project that we are project owners on. This is a tobacco plantation from before and after the Civil War. And so I can add material by adding a work.
You can upload a PDF that has page images in it, or you can upload a zip file that has folders of images. Each folder or each PDF is treated as a document, and then each image, or that's either in the PDF or in the folder, is a page. You can also...
So if your institution uses Content DM, you can just paste in the URL of a compound object or a collection, and we'll import all of that. There are lots of other services that support the IIIF interface, the IIIF APIs, that mean that we can really, there's no uploading needed in that case. You just paste in a URL and the whole thing comes in. Same is true for media on the Internet Archive.
Yep. So we try to make it easy.
Right. Yeah, we try to have as many on-ramps and off-ramps as we can. So for off-ramps, we have a lot of different ways to export material. So if I take a look at this one document, Diary of Jeremiah Graves, Volume 2, Book 10, I can pull that out in quite a few different formats. So
HTML, plain text, TEI XML if you're an academic. That's kind of actually our most comprehensive one. This is great for doing search. It's also kind of what we push to systems like Content DM or AM Cortex, because that's what they support. You can pull out an unstyled HTML version, which is good if you want to like do stuff with it to publish on the web. Lots of different things.
In addition, we can generate PDFs, Microsoft Word. Those can be exposed for researchers to download if you want, or you can keep that turned off. There are also a handful of other tools that we integrate with for doing analysis. So this is a fun way of pushing it to a word tree algorithm that lets us say, all right, well, I'm interested in the word frost. All right. Okay, it only appears once. Okay, that's no fun.
Tobacco, because this is a tobacco farm, right?
Yeah, let's try tobacco. Okay, tobacco appears all the time, and it turns out they're mostly working on tobacco at Stony Point and in the morning or yesterday. So, yeah, and so we have lots of download formats, and as we mentioned before, you can pull out any of the tabular data in spreadsheets.
Right. So another comment in the chat. Thanks so much for developing From the Page. I'm the founder and program director of Black and Historic Preservation. We hosted a transcribe-a-thon where we hosted volunteers who virtually transcribed the New York City Municipal Archives records of slavery. Received international interest, was a great event. We plan to do more in 2026, yay. My question is about sharing the work done on From the Page with other online archives. Do the agencies that host projects in From the Page download the transcripts and then share them in other sites such as Family Search or Ancestry.com? I think that's a great question.
We don't know,
Yeah.
is the answer, because we encourage the institutions that we host to pull their material out and then reuse it however they can. We don't have control over that.
We also encourage them to keep it up on From the Page because we know that we've got good kind of Google foo and people searching for their ancestors, it shows up.
But so one of the interesting projects that we host is, so Library of Virginia, we've mentioned, is very successful. They've been working on a big initiative called Virginia Untold, in which they are focusing specifically on documents within their archives that are of use to descendant communities, both of enslaved people and free people of color in Virginia before 1865. And one of the things that they've been doing is working with what are called the Free Negro Registers. So in order to not be deported out of Virginia or re-enslaved, if you were a free person of color, you had to register with the local county clerk. So these documents are kind of irregular, but they are a genealogical goldmine because they mention households and histories behind people, and they're really pretty amazing. And so Library of Virginia is taking those materials and ingesting them into their own system, their own platform that just does kind of full-text search. But they're also taking them and cleaning them up and publishing them as a data set on the Open Data Portal.
Virginia Open Data Portal, yes, that's the name of it, yeah.
Where anyone can use them, right? And do whatever kind of analysis that they want.
But that's kind of more data set oriented. I think, what Kennedy is talking about is like, can we get this material in places where everyone's looking, Ancestry, Family Search? And I think the answer to that is go back to the institution and tell them you'd like it there. Some of those platforms have friendlier relationships with the cultural heritage institutions than others. So, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, we try to provide all the exports, but that's kind of the end of where we can,
Yeah, we have kind of a comprehensive. All right,
I think that's, okay, no more questions for the moment. What else can we show you? Okay, so
we could talk about the fun AI stuff.
Yeah, well, actually we should, because I know someone at the beginning of the Q&A said, oh, I'm an AI transcriber. So we're technologists, and we've been watching and talking about and experimenting with a lot of AI systems over the last year and a half, trying to figure out, does it have a place here, and does it have a place in generating transcriptions for archives? And a lot of it for us is we still want humans to be in control and in charge of choosing whether to use AI or not. We also want to know that the AI results are trustworthy and aren't what we call seductively plausible. I think you should pull Stillwell from USD.
Okay.
And so we have two different.
I've actually got one up here.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We've got two different integrations. One with a service out of Austria called Transcribus, which you're pulling up some Transcribus stuff. Sorry, before I interrupt and be like, no, go do this other thing.
Steering wheel here. That's right.
And so what we use that for, and it's actually super cool. This AI assist button, you can click on it.
Transcription view, right.
We have this AI assist button at the top, and you can click on it, and we do an overlay of what Transcribus has returned. And the nice thing about Transcribus is it will actually give us what's called bounding boxes, tell us where on the page a particular word was, which is what lets us do this, which is really neat. And you can, in this particular case, the transcription is excellent.
It's not always, but there are some things that it's better at than humans are, and some things that it's worse at.
It's actually great on things like if you have a lot of bleed through, so it's hard to make out the word on this side because you've got so much bleed through from the other side. Transcribus is great at ignoring the bleed through. So
yeah,
that's
it's
one
surprising.
Of the yeah.
Yeah, we also have a way to use that as an output as a draft version for people to edit, but more interesting. So we've always shied away from using things like ChatGPT.
Because it lies, and we
Right.
do not want lies in transcriptions that archives are using. That is the reason.
Yeah, fundamentally,
yeah, it will make things up.
It makes as many errors as something like Transcribus does, but the errors it makes are more believable than the originals, so it's not possible to spot them, right, as an export. So we recently started working with an alternative large language model, Google Gemini, which we've done a lot of testing, other people have done testing. It is the first large language model that we've seen that does not have those kinds of hallucinations.
If it can't read something, it will put something like smudge as opposed to making up a word.
Yeah. So here's an example of a page that has already been transcribed.
By a human.
By a human. And then we sent the page to Transcribus.
We sent
it to Gemini, and we got this result back. And because it was transcribed by a human, we have the ability to compare the Gemini output against the ground truth of what the human did. So we're using this version comparison screen to visualize this. So you can see anything that is in red came out of Gemini, anything that's green is the correct thing, the actual human
interpreted thing. Maybe not correct. This is the problem.
Yes.
Gemini is about as good as a human, and we disagree on some things, and some of them are differences in capitalization or how to mark
okay, so
strike-throughs.
Present aldermen versus alderman, that's our first difference. And I think
Ian.
I think Ian. I think in this case Gemini was correct.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, we have eels. How many L's is there is a question, and I really can't tell the answer there.
I see two.
You see two, and Gemini. Okay, Gemini got that one right. Okay, let's take a look at
Friedenberg.
Friedenberg.
ID. So.
Gemini got that one right. Wow.
No. Oh. Gemini got that one wrong.
Oh, Gemini got that wrong.
And this is
this
is actually
Friedenberg.
what we have observed is things like names. Humans are better at because the name, and part of it is maybe this is spelled wrong for how most people spell this last name, but if you want it accurate to the document, then the human is going to. And Gemini is pretty good at making it accurate to the document, but humans seem better at reading names than AIs.
Nevertheless, this is spectacular performance, and so we've started trying to visualize that as well. So if we take a look down here at the statistics, comparing the ground truth, the human work, which again we think may have some errors in it now, against the Gemini output, you can see the character error rate is about 3.6%, but a lot of those are stylistic questions. The block quotation that Gemini puts the quote mark before every single line here, this grant, that's not something
meaningful.
It's not something that meaningful, right?
We're hoping to improve our prompting, so maybe it's more consistent with what a human would do.
If we make a comparison looking at just the text that doesn't have any punctuation, white space, or case, then we see Gemini got a 1.1% character error rate, which is really good, right? That's up there with what you'd expect from a human. However, if you look at just the words that are names, for example, the non-stop words, the ones that are really meaningful, the accuracy is still only about 92%. So it's still getting some of the most important stuff
Well,
wrong.
and here's the question. How do we use this? How do we use this in a way that still respects volunteers and humans? And so what we're doing with this is, if you go to the correct tab here, we can't do the overlay because Gemini is not giving us those bounding boxes, but we can.
Yeah, if we were starting this from scratch, and don't worry, I'm not going to hit save here. We can
Click.
hit the AI draft, and that gives us a draft to start with, and then edit. Now, normally, if we were using ChatGPT, we still wouldn't be willing to do that because the draft would be too believable. But with Gemini, so far, we're pretty confident that the mistakes it's going to make are not going to be seductively plausible.
The other thing we're doing is when you click that button to get an AI draft, and then when you save the page, we're actually logging that you started with an AI draft because we want that to be something that's visible, so that
In our metadata, right? We want people
actually
to
in
know.
our deeds too, that list of everything
yeah.
that's happening. When a page is saved, we also log a deed that says AI draft button was clicked for this page.
So everyone knows you push the button.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Yeah.
But like we want
Transparency.
transparency.
right. So that's kind of how we're thinking about this. This is a really hard world, but we feel like, there's a lot of speed and how much we can make accessible by working this way, right? And so that's the balance, is meaningful work for volunteers, which we think is awesome and great, and we are absolutely still doing, and most of our institutions are driving to that because that's what they were drawn to crowdsourcing for in the first place. But we also know that there's a lot of institutions out there that need a lot of material processed and need it processed so people can find it and do research with it.
And if you go back to the selection criteria I mentioned, not every piece of material is great for crowdsourcing. Not every material is appropriate for crowdsourcing.
So yeah, that's our big challenge over the next year, is to figure out how this fits together and do it in a way that's respectful and trustworthy and transparent. So
Yeah. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Is there anybody have a final question? No. If not, then we can go ahead and sign off. Well, thank you
all for
coming.
coming. Yeah. Really appreciate it.